My wife left me because her best friend lied about me. But 18 months later, her friend's ex-girlfriend sent me the proof that changed everything, and justice was brutal. I'm 35 years old. I live in Denver, and it's been about a year and a half since I got divorced from who I thought would be the love of my life. And the thing is, it wasn't because of problems between us. It wasn't because we stopped loving each other or anything like that. It was because my ex-wife's best friend literally destroyed our marriage with lies, and my wife believed her instead of believing me. I still have a hard time processing everything that happened, honestly. But I need to tell this story because the ending, well, let's just say there was some justice in the end, even though that doesn't fix all the damage that was done. I met Charlotte about 6 years ago at a work event, one of those boring conferences where everyone's drinking cheap wine and pretending they care about networking. She worked in marketing for a tech company and I was in software development, and we connected immediately. You know, that instant chemistry you can't explain. We started dating, and everything was perfect the first few months, until I met Brittany. Brittany was Charlotte's best friend since college, and when I say best friend, I mean they were inseparable like Siamese twins. They talked every day, saw each other at least 2 or 3 times a week, and Charlotte was always showing me pictures of the two of them on Instagram or telling me stories about their adventures together. The first time I met Brittany was at brunch, about 3 months after Charlotte and I started dating, and honestly, from that first moment, I knew she was going to be a problem. I don't know how to explain it, but Brittany had this energy of wanting to be the center of attention all the time, and you could tell she didn't like that Charlotte was with someone who took the spotlight away from her. Throughout the entire brunch, she kept making passive-aggressive comments about me. Like, "Oh, how interesting that you work in tech. Charlotte always said she'd never date a nerd." Or things like, "I hope, Charlotte is very special and needs someone who really values her," looking at me like I was an idiot who didn't deserve to be there. I mentioned to Charlotte afterwards that Brittany had seemed a bit intense to me, and she just laughed and told me Brittany was like that, very protective, but that she was good people once you got to know her better. I wanted to believe her, obviously, because I loved Charlotte and didn't want to cause problems with her best friend, so I decided to give her a chance. Things were more or less manageable the first year, although Brittany always found ways to insert herself into our relationship. If Charlotte and I had plans for a romantic dinner, Brittany suddenly had an emergency and needed Charlotte to come to her apartment immediately. If I bought Charlotte a gift, Brittany would make comments about how she had given her something similar but better years ago. It was exhausting, but I tolerated it because Charlotte was amazing and worth dealing with her annoying friend. After about 2.5 years of being together, I proposed to Charlotte on a hike through the Rocky Mountains, one of our favorite places, and she said yes, through tears of happiness. It was one of the best moments of my life. I literally felt like everything was falling into place. But then the nightmare of wedding planning started, and Brittany became absolutely unbearable. Charlotte wanted Brittany to be her maid of honor, which I completely understood. But Brittany wasn't satisfied with just that. She wanted to have a say in every decision, from the color of the napkins to the guest list, and if Charlotte chose something Brittany didn't like, Brittany would create drama until Charlotte changed her mind. I tried to stay out of it because I didn't want to be the controlling groom who gets involved in wedding plans, but there came a point where it was too much. The moment I remember most was when Brittany demanded, and when I say demanded, it's because she literally demanded it, that she wanted to walk down the aisle alone before Charlotte entered, like her own special moment. Because, according to her, she had been part of Charlotte's life much longer than me and deserved that recognition. Charlotte thought it was a sweet idea and asked me what I thought, and I told her I thought it was a bit strange that her wedding was so much about Brittany. But in the end, we agreed, because Brittany threatened not to participate in the wedding if we didn't give her her special moment. The wedding itself was beautiful despite all the previous drama, although Brittany made sure to be the center of attention at every opportunity she had. During her speech as maid of honor, she talked more about herself and her friendship with Charlotte than about us as a couple. And at one point, she even made a comment like joking but not really joking about how she knew Charlotte better than anyone and hoped I could measure up. Several of my friends commented, afterwards, that they thought the speech was weird, but I just wanted the day to end well and not dwell on the negative things. The first months of marriage were incredible. We lived in a house we'd bought together in a quiet Denver neighborhood. We both had stable jobs, and we were making plans for the future. Maybe have kids in a couple of years, travel, All those things newlywed couples plan. But Brittany continued to be a constant presence in our lives. She'd show up at our house unannounced, call Charlotte at any hour of day or night, and Charlotte always listened to her. I mentioned several times that we needed to establish clearer boundaries with Brittany, that it was important for us to have our space as a married couple, but Charlotte got defensive and said I was being selfish and didn't understand how important her friendship with Brittany was. Then, about a year and a half into being married, Brittany and her boyfriend Ryan ended their relationship pretty dramatically, something about him cheating on her or something like that. I never knew the exact details because honestly I didn't care. Brittany was devastated, according to Charlotte. She couldn't stay in her apartment because there were too many painful memories, and Charlotte suggested that Brittany stay with us for a few days until she felt better. I wasn't happy about the idea at all, but I also didn't want to seem like an insensitive monster, so I agreed, thinking it would literally be a few days, like a week maximum. Brittany moved into our guest room with her 2 huge suitcases, and what was supposedly going to be a few days turned into weeks. Living with Brittany was an absolute nightmare. She left her stuff all over the house, used my bathroom products without asking, ate our food and never replaced anything, and worst of all, she completely monopolized Charlotte's time. Every night when I got home from work, Charlotte and Brittany were in the living room watching movies or gossiping, and when I tried to spend time with my wife, Brittany would make comments about how I was insensitive to her difficult situation. I couldn't have a private conversation with Charlotte because Brittany was always there. We couldn't have intimacy because Brittany was in the next room and the walls weren't thick. And I basically felt like a stranger in my own house. After a month of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I told Charlotte we needed to talk alone and explained that while I understood Brittany was going through a difficult time, it had been enough time and Brittany needed to find her own place. Charlotte got extremely upset with me, accused me of being cruel and selfish, said she couldn't believe I was kicking out her best friend when she needed it most. And we ended up in a horrible fight where she basically gave me an ultimatum, like either I accept that Brittany stays as long as she needs, or I sleep on the couch. I wasn't going to let myself be kicked out of my own bedroom, so I held my ground and told her Brittany had to leave that week. Charlotte cried, Brittany cried when they told her, and I ended up as the villain of the story. But the thing is, it was my house too, and I had a right to have my space. Brittany finally left about 3 days later, but the damage was already done. The relationship between Charlotte and me was tense. She treated me coldly and spent even more time with Brittany outside the house, and I felt like we were growing distant. I tried to fix things. I planned a romantic dinner, bought her flowers, wrote her a letter explaining my feelings, but Charlotte remained resentful. Brittany didn't help at all either. Every time she saw Charlotte, she'd fill her head with ideas about how I was controlling and didn't value their friendship. And although I didn't hear these conversations directly, Charlotte would repeat things Brittany said, and it was obvious she was trying to sabotage our marriage. And then what basically destroyed everything happened. It was a Friday night, about 2 weeks after Brittany had left our house, and I'd gone out with some work friends to have a few beers at a downtown bar. Charlotte had plans with Brittany that night, so I thought it would be a good idea to give her her space, and I'd do my thing. We were at the bar for about 3 hours, talking about work and sports, nothing special, and then I went home around 11 at night. When I got there, Charlotte wasn't there. I assumed she was still with Brittany, so I got comfortable and started watching TV waiting for her. Charlotte got home around 1 in the morning, and from the moment she walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. Her eyes were red from crying, she was shaking, and she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, like between fury and absolute pain. I asked her what was wrong, and she just said, "Brittany saw you." I had no idea what she was talking about. I was literally completely confused, and I asked her to explain. Charlotte then laid out this whole story about how Brittany had been at the same bar where I was with my friends and had seen me making out with another woman in a dark corner of the bar. She said Brittany had called her immediately, devastated because she had to tell her best friend that her husband was cheating on her and that Brittany had described the woman in detail, a blonde in a red dress, and that she'd seen me with my hands on her waist kissing her passionately. I just sat there unable to believe what I was hearing. I told Charlotte that was completely false, that I'd been with my friends all night and hadn't even talked to any woman except the waitress. But Charlotte didn't believe me. She was hysterical, screaming that Brittany had no reason to lie, that Brittany was her best friend and would never hurt her by making something like that up, and that, obviously, I was the liar trying to cover up my infidelity. I begged her to listen to me, told her I could call my friends to confirm I was with them the whole time, but she said my friends would obviously cover for me. I suggested we go to the bar and ask to see the security cameras, but she said that wouldn't prove anything because maybe it happened in the bathroom or outside. It didn't matter what I said or what evidence I offered. Charlotte had decided to believe Brittany instead of believing me, her husband. We spent the entire night arguing in circles, me denying everything because literally nothing had happened, and her insisting that Brittany had seen what she saw. The next day, Charlotte packed a suitcase and left to stay with Brittany, and I was left alone in the house feeling like my world was falling apart. The following days, I tried to contact Charlotte hundreds of times, calls, messages, emails, but she didn't respond to anything. Finally, about a week later, I received a text message from her that simply said, "I want a divorce. My lawyer will contact you soon." I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved more than anything in the world, was asking me for a divorce via text message based on a completely fabricated lie by her manipulative friend. And there was absolutely nothing I could do to convince her of the truth. I tried to talk to her in person, but Brittany was always there like a bodyguard blocking my access. And the few times I managed to be alone with Charlotte for a few minutes, she just repeated that she couldn't forgive the betrayal and that we needed to end everything as quickly as possible. The divorce process was quick and brutal. Charlotte didn't want anything of mine. She just wanted to end the relationship and move on with her life, which in a way made everything easier legally, but emotionally it was devastating. We had to sell the house we'd bought together, divide our things, and basically dismantle the entire life we'd built, all because Brittany had decided to destroy our marriage with her lies. The worst part was that Brittany told her version of the story to all our mutual friends, painting me as a horrible cheater who had betrayed poor Charlotte, her best friend, and a lot of people believed her. I lost friendships, became the villain in the social circle we shared with Charlotte, and for months I felt like my life was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tried to move forward as best I could. I moved to a smaller apartment, focused on my work, tried to exercise and keep myself busy so I wouldn't constantly think about everything I'd lost. Some of my closest friends, the ones who really knew me, knew I was incapable of cheating on anyone and supported me through the whole process. But there was this constant emptiness in my chest, because I knew I was innocent, and there was no way to prove it. The injustice of it all consumed me. I constantly thought about Brittany and why she had done this, what she had gained from destroying my marriage, and the only conclusion I could reach was that she had never wanted Charlotte to be happy with me, because that meant Charlotte would need her less. About 2 months had passed since the divorce, when I received a Facebook message from a woman named Danielle, who I barely knew. Danielle was Brittany's friend, or had been Brittany's friend, and she was telling me in the message that she needed to talk to me urgently about something important related to Charlotte and Brittany. Honestly, I thought it was some kind of trap, maybe Brittany trying to get more ammunition against me, but Danielle insisted it was something I needed to know and that she felt horrible for not having said anything before. I agreed to meet her at a neutral coffee shop, more out of curiosity than anything else. When we met, Danielle looked nervous and guilty. And before I could say anything, she took out her phone and showed me a series of screenshots of text messages between her and Brittany. The messages were from the night Brittany had supposedly seen me kissing another woman, and in them, Brittany was telling Danielle the whole truth. In the messages, Brittany admitted that she had made up the entire story about seeing me with another woman, that she had never been at that bar, and that she had done it because she was fed up with me having turned Charlotte against her and had ruined their friendship. And the messages said things like, "I finally told Charlotte her husband cheated on her." Obviously, it's not true, but she believed me completely. Now she's going to leave him, and we can go back to being just the two of us, and he deserves to suffer after what he did to me. I sat there, looking at those screenshots, unable to process what I was seeing. It was the proof. The real and tangible proof that Brittany had lied, that I had been innocent all along, that my marriage had been destroyed by a deliberate and calculated lie. I asked Danielle why she was showing me this now, why she had waited 2 months, and she explained through tears that at the time I thought it wasn't her place to get involved, that it was drama between Brittany and Charlotte, and she didn't want to get involved. But that lately, Brittany had been doing similar things with other people, making up stories and manipulating situations, and Danielle had realized that Brittany was toxic and she couldn't stay quiet any longer. She told me she had broken off her friendship with Brittany and that she felt horrible for having allowed all this to happen. I asked Danielle to send me the screenshots. I needed to have that evidence, and she agreed immediately. She also told me she would be willing to talk to Charlotte directly if necessary to confirm the messages were real. I left that coffee shop feeling a strange mix of vindication and absolute fury. On one hand, I had proof of my innocence. I could clear my name and show Charlotte and everyone else that I had been the victim of a cruel lie. But on the other hand, none of that would give me back my marriage or the months of suffering I'd gone through. The first thing I did was contact Charlotte. I sent her a message saying I needed to talk to her urgently, that I had important information she needed to see, and surprisingly, she agreed to meet me. We met at a Starbucks near where she was living now, and when she arrived, I could see that she'd also been suffering. She looked tired and sad, but there was still that hardness in her eyes when she looked at me. I didn't waste time with preambles. I took out my phone and showed her the screenshots that Danielle had sent me. I saw the exact moment when Charlotte understood what she was seeing. Her face went from confusion to shock to absolute horror as she read Brittany's messages, admitting she had made up the entire story. She started shaking. Tears began falling down her cheeks, and she whispered over and over, "This can't be real. This can't be real." I explained how I'd gotten the messages, offered her Danielle's contact so she could verify everything directly, and slowly Charlotte processed that her best friend, the person she trusted most in the world, had destroyed her marriage with a deliberate lie. Charlotte completely collapsed. She started crying uncontrollably, saying she was so sorry, that she'd been an idiot, that she should never have distrusted me, that she'd ruined everything by believing Brittany. She begged me to forgive her, to try to fix things, that we could start over and forget all this. And the thing is, part of me, a very small part, wanted to tell her yes, that we could try again, because I still loved her on some level. But the bigger part of me, the rational part, knew things could never go back to how they were before. I told Charlotte I appreciated her apology, but the damage was already done. I explained that she had chosen to believe Brittany over me without giving me any benefit of the doubt, that she had ended our marriage via text message without even trying to investigate the truth, and that showed a fundamental lack of trust that couldn't be repaired. I told her that even if we tried to get back together, I would always remember that when things got tough, she didn't defend me, didn't trust me, and chose her manipulative friend over her husband. Charlotte continued begging for another chance, but I stood firm in my decision. We said goodbye, and that was the last time I spoke directly to Charlotte. What I did next was contact all the mutual friends who had heard Brittany's version and showed them the screenshots. One by one, the people who had judged me and cut off contact started apologizing to me, admitting they'd been unfair and felt bad for not giving me the benefit of the doubt. It was satisfying in a way to receive those apologies and see how people realized who Brittany really was. But it was also bittersweet because no apology could give me back my marriage or the lost time. The story of Brittany's lies spread through our social circle like wildfire. People started sharing their own experiences with Brittany's manipulative behavior, other lies she'd told, other dramas she'd caused, and basically Brittany was completely socially isolated. Nobody wanted to be her friend. She was blocked from social groups and events, and according to Amanda, another mutual friend who kept me updated, Brittany started making dramatic posts on social media about how everyone had betrayed her and how she was the victim of an unfair smear campaign. It was almost comical to see her play the victim when she had been the architect of the entire disaster. Amanda also told me things got worse for Brittany in other aspects of her life. Apparently, the drama reached her workplace somehow. I don't know exactly how, but basically her reputation was so damaged that she ended up getting fired, something about creating a toxic work environment. And Charlotte moved back in with her parents after all the scandal. Amanda told me Charlotte's mom was furious with her for having destroyed her marriage by believing Brittany, and that Charlotte basically spent months being criticized by her own family for having been so stupid. At some point, Charlotte tried to reconcile with Brittany, I guess because it was the only familiar thing she had left after losing everything else. But according to Amanda, Brittany rejected her cruelly, blaming her for not having defended her enough when everyone found out the truth. So in the end, everyone lost something, I guess. Charlotte lost her marriage, her credibility, her family's respect, and eventually even her friendship with Brittany. Brittany lost all her friends, her job, and her reputation. And me, well, I lost my marriage to the woman I loved, lost years of my life, and although eventually my name was cleared, the emotional damage was already done. The difference is, I wasn't to blame for anything, and eventually I was able to start rebuilding my life without all that burden of lies. It's been about 6 months since everything was revealed, and honestly, I'm in a much better place now. I have a job I like. I've been casually dating without rushing into anything serious, and I've learned a lot about the importance of setting boundaries and not tolerating toxic people just to keep the peace. I still think about Charlotte sometimes. I'm not going to lie, but no longer with that crushing sadness I felt before, but rather with a kind of acceptance that some things just aren't meant to work out no matter how much you want them to. Last week I ran into Charlotte by chance at the supermarket. It was awkward for a second, but we greeted each other politely, asked how the other was doing with that superficiality you use with strangers, and each continued with our shopping. And the truth is, I didn't feel anything. Not anger or sadness or nostalgia, just a kind of neutral emptiness. I guess that's how you know you've truly moved on, when the person who was once your world becomes just another face in the supermarket. I don't know if Charlotte will ever forgive herself for what happened, and honestly, that's not my problem anymore. I did my part, cleared my name, and now I'm focused on building a life worth living without all the toxicity that kept me trapped for so long.